why don't you tell the fans a little bit about yourself? How did you get into writing for Just Mets and obviously SNY and MLB.com? How did you get into it 12 years ago? And what made you decide to continue doing it?
I mean, honestly, it was just good luck, right place, right time for me. I just got to know Matt Cerrone and folks at SNY at around just after the 2008 season. We started talking and chatting, and they started using my photos on MetsBlog.com and more, and we got into a conversation, in the middle of that winter. He was asking me if I'd be interested in writing. And I'm like, writing? I'm a IT guy, I just happen to have a camera that I take to the stadium. I've never written anything. I got a C in my freshman English class, so, I mean, he kept, pushing me to write. And I said, we got to just after opening day that year. And, it was really, really bugging me at that point. And I said, look, okay. I said, you win. I said, I'll write a couple of, maybe some, smaller news items. I can do that. I'm going to need help and guidance because, the hell if I know what I'm doing here, So, the next thing I know, I'm like, I don't want to say I'm his partner at that time, but I just was writing a ton, maybe 30 posts a week, for SNY. And it evolved into this. It was something I guess I found myself good at, and I had no idea I had the ability to write. I had no idea the ability to network, with, the people in the organization, and really just develop relationships and talk to people, and you realize they're just human beings. They're just richer than me, and it turned into this. It just turned into a sort of a fun hobby, which was became successful very quickly for me. And I was with SNY for 5 or 6 years, and MLB approached me at the time and said, "How would you like to start a project just like that, with us?" And at the time there were some, some issues, not issues. There were some changes taking place at SNY, and I felt like it was a good opportunity to see if I can do this all by myself. And this was around 2015, right when the Mets, that was the year the Mets really got good. We built this site, which was, I'd like to say was a little bit different just because there was a lot of long form on the original Just Mets in 2015. A lot of exclusives. There wasn't a lot of, not a lot of company stuff going on, not a lot of MLB centric stuff. It was just, the Mets telling it like it was, just what I did with SNY, for a really long time, and it was wildly successful. We did over 1 million unique visits to the sites in just 5 months, which for a Mets blog, was pretty incredible. They just didn't want to pick up the project. There were a lot of issues, a lot of changes going on in MLB. As if you think about that time, went from Selig to Manfred. During that time, there were a lot of executive changes, a lot of people, coming in, going out, and they just didn't want to be burdened with, that kind of project.
Oh, stop, Mike. You have a lot of idiots. Okay. You went from Rob Manfred.
It wasn't up to me. I was shocked when they pulled me into the meeting. I had no idea. Believe me, I had no idea.
Well, they should have had me in that meeting because I would have told Rob, you know what? Why don't you go Manfred somebody else, okay? Because you're an idiot.
I don't think that's a good idea.
And by the way, Bud Selig, who absolutely ruined baseball in the 90s. He allowed steroids, and then all of a sudden, when politics got involved with it, I'm going to hide. I'm going to throw everybody under the bus. It wasn't me. Bud Selig's another idiot who went to the Hall of Fame. And why isn't George Steinbrenner in the Hall of Fame yet? Who knows? So
everything's all well and good until you're caught, right?
Absolutely.
So, I think everybody knew that about steroids, at the time, and they would have they'd probably be turning a blind eye to this day if not for Jose Canseco.
Well, right? That's true too. Wonderful book, by the way. Wonderful.
But it wasn't Manfred who wanted the site, squished. It was, there were just some other things going on, which were things I did not agree with, obviously didn't want, and obviously I had bias, as, in that situation, but it was what it was, So it took a long time, mostly because, I mean, personally, I wanted any new project, anything I engaged with, I wanted it to have meaning and a purpose. I wanted it to have legitimacy. And, for a long time, that was really hard to find, especially with the Mets, for lack of a better term, stinking it up for, the years in between. They weren't very good, outside of 2016 until, I mean, they haven't been good since 2016. So, but we figured a plan of what this might look like, and it hasn't been totally reborn yet. There's still a lot of technical hurdles. There's a bigger picture, of course. There's always a bigger picture to everything, which I can't get into right now. But in the end, we foresee a site that, think of it like Twitter is the muddy. If Twitter is all, muddied waters, this is going to be clear water. So you can see everything that's going on with the Mets without the noise, without the distractions, without, really all the BS that you see, hear, and read. We just want the facts. We want the proper context to those facts. Mm. And, if you want long form, we'll write some long form and it'll be available to the audience. But we just want you to be able to find a place where you can go get your news, get it quickly, and then go about your day and check back in a little bit later. I mean, that was, kind of sort of what, Matt Strode and I wanted with Mets Blog all those years ago. But I think, at least with Rich and myself, I think we can modernize that vision and take it to the next level. It's going to take a little bit of time to come up with, the technology to do this. That's really where we're challenged right now.
So why don't we get into the New York Mets? The GM position is open. The Mets are probably the only team in MLB history that had two really good GMs set up in position to take over this team after Sandy decides to go somewhere else or retire or whatever he plans to do. And both of them get fired in the same year, okay? One who can't keep his eyes and his phone lit up looking at women, and the other one can't keep his hands off the booze, I guess. I mean...
Leave booze out.
I mean, seriously. So who do you see the Mets hiring in the offseason? There's a couple of candidates. They lost a couple of candidates. They wanted the Milwaukee GM. He decided to stay in Milwaukee. He's from New York. A lot of Met fans were very excited with him. They were talking about Theo Epstein coming to the Mets and helping build this dynasty of a team like he did with the Cubs and what he did with the Boston Red Sox. He's not coming. So who is it? Who do you think it is? And what do the Mets need? What does he need to do and what he needs to do to bring in that coach, that manager that could change this team?
Well, that's a good question, right? I mean, I think going back to the original big three, i.e., David Stearns, Theo Epstein, and Billy Beane. I don't know that any of them were ever realistic. I mean, I keep circling back to Theo Epstein as being the most realistic because he was not employed by another team. He wasn't under contract with anybody else. But I think it's been well documented that he has bigger plans for his next gig with a club. Mm-hmm. And, he's been there, done that as the president of baseball and the GM of, two laughing stocks and, turning it entirely around and into storied championships. I mean, I don't think the Mets necessarily fall into, that category. I think they fall into their own, category of, that lacks credibility. But I don't think any of them were ever realistic. I think it was. I don't think it's any secret that Billy Beane has roots in Oakland. He has a family there. He's been there since 1995, 1996. Mm-hmm. Where was he going at age 60? Like, mm-hmm. Is he going to uproot his entire family and his life from Oakland and come to New York? I mean, maybe if the Mets offered him $20 million a year, he would. But, I mean, realistically, that's not going to happen. And so I never viewed Billy Beane as the realistic possibility, although of the three, I mean, he was the most interesting to me just because I think he would have meshed the best with Sandy Alderson because of their history. And, everybody knows their history. I mean, with, back in the Oakland days and, they reunited, in 2018, 2019 when Sandy was a special assistant over there. So there's an obviously good working relationship there, but it just never seemed like a realistic possibility he was going to move. Milwaukee was never going to let David Stearns interview anywhere, as long as he was under contract. So, there was this notion that, they'd be able to land one of those big fish, but like, I don't think anyone was, thinking clearly on that. I mean, I never thought any of the three would be, were obvious choices for this job. Now, who that might be, it's a good question. I think, Josh Burns, who's an executive with the Los Angeles Dodgers. I mean, honestly, I think should be their top target. I mean, I think his, he's well regarded. He's highly touted. He's always, very coveted. And I think he's a good fit for the job. I think a lot of this noise about the Mets being, jokes between Sandy Alderson and Steve Cohen is a little misconceived and a little unfair. And we have to remember who might be providing these one-liners to people in the media. I mean, I think Billy Beane said it best, Andy Martino yesterday. He said, wouldn't want to work with Sandy Alderson? And he's right. Like, you're talking about a Hall of Fame executive. He's a guy who does not want anything to do with baseball. He wants to run the business for a few years and call it a career, if you will. So I really don't think that's an issue. I also think that, as far as the GM is concerned, I think it's hard to answer now because we don't even know who the president of the team is going to be. So I think first things first, put that piece in place if they can, and then see what kind of brand that president is trying to build, with a GM and the people he surrounds himself with, because that's really the key of any president of any company. It's not the person, it's who they surround him with. So who he surrounds himself with, or she surrounds herself with. So, those are going to be important pieces to that puzzle, but you need that first piece, and that's the president at this point.
So I've said much of the season that in terms of Steve Cohen being a rich owner, the richest owner in baseball, second in all of sports, and also Sandy Alderson kind of being the other extreme where he comes from the Moneyball roots with Billy Beane with that athletics team, that a lot of front office decisions were kind of like an indecisiveness thing. Like, you look at the trade deadline, they traded for Javier Baez, which was a big splash, but that was all they got. They didn't get any pitching like a lot of people thought and stuff like that. And same thing with the free agency before that. They got some relief pitching and obviously Lindor. So do you think they need to find maybe a middle ground when it comes to a philosophy standpoint? Should they go all in on trying to be a big market team, or should they maybe try to stick with Sandy Alderson's philosophy with the Moneyball and the analytics?
Analytics are important. If you're not analytical, you're not competitive in this industry. Every team, from the Marlins to the Dodgers are, center their brand around analytics, what they're trying to do to be a cut above everybody else. And these clubs believe that it's, that's built into the science, that science is an important part of, being competitive and being a winning team. And, look, it's hard to argue, with the success of the Tampa Bay Rays, the success of the Houston Astros, the success of the Los Angeles Dodgers, three clubs which are, analytics heavy, analytics centric, especially a team like the Rays who, completely depend on being creative and finding that market inefficiency on an annual basis. I think if the Mets were to abandon that and go back to the way they were during the Wilpon years, I think you're going to see more of the same, if not worse, because they just can't compete. They can't play on the same playing field as even, the worst teams in the league, because they're all being scientific. Now, on the flip side of it, I think you need to strike a balance between the two, because I always tell people that baseball is the most irrational sports of all the major sports, in this country. And because once that ball's thrown, you have no control over what happens. Once that ball's hit off the bat, you have no control over what happens. There's no science or analytic that can necessarily determine what's next. And you see that all the time with, when a left-handed hitter is up and they put the Ted Williams shift on that hitter and he squirts one up the left side.
That Tyler? Squirts. Yeah, so just so you know.
That's an industry.
I know what that means. You know what that means?
I know what it means. I just hope you know what it means.
Do you know what it means?
I don't think he understands what it means. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's an industry term.
We're just Mark. Michael. We like to mess around on this show. So
I hear you.